Good afternoon, everybody. We're just giving it a minute for everyone to join. Welcome to IVC Africa webinar this afternoon. We'll just give it another 30 seconds or so before we kickstart. In the meanwhile, do feel free to tell us who you are and where you're from in the chat box. Always lovely to see new people joining our webinars. Alrighty, Natalie, I think we're going to give it another minute and then we'll kickstart.
Okay.
Thank you. Hello, Christine. Christine is our Vice Chair. Welcome. Always lovely to see board members joining us.
Thank you, Rihanna.
Righty. Alrighty. We're just waiting for a few people to join and then I'll start with the introductions. Hello, Chepo. Hello, hello. I see wonderful people joining us. Oh, look at this. Gosh. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Righty, I think it's 2 minutes past, so let's kick start. I'm going to start with the introductions and then we'll hand over. So a hearty welcome to everybody who've joined us. This is IVC Africa, and our region brings together communication professionals from across Southern, Western and Eastern Africa. For information about who we are and what we do, follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, or visit ivcafrica.co.za. For membership information, please feel free to contact our Secretariat, Natalie Patch, who will be happy to assist, and you're more than welcome to post your inquiry in the chat. And then our 2026 IVC Africa Conference, taking place from 21 to 23 October, will bring communication professionals together in one of the continent's most iconic cities, Cape Town, a conference not to be missed. I'm Rihanna Sinden, Director of Professional Development, and it's an absolute pleasure to host today's masterclass led by Adedoyin and Emmanuel. As I've said earlier, please introduce yourself in the chat, sharing your name and where you're joining us from. So, earlier this year, Adedoyin and I were discussing geopolitical uncertainty and its impact on our roles as communication professionals, consultants, and leaders. We agreed that it was a topic worth exploring by hosting a webinar. But during a conversation with Emmanuel Tarfa, a distinguished management consultant and strategist who advises executives on complexity,
Sorry, Rihanna, you've just gone on mute. If you can just start again. Rihanna, sorry, you're on mute.
Am I back?
You are. Okay, sorry,
Okay.
you can start again.
No, let's rewind. So during a conversation with Emmanuel Tarfa, who is a distinguished management consultant and strategist who advises executives on complexity, disruption, and high-stakes decision-making, we realized the subject warranted a deeper conversation and would be better suited to a masterclass. And so here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the highly capable hands of Adedoyin Yesimi, SMP, an award-winning strategic communication leader and co-founder of the Comms Avenue, and Emmanuel Tarfa, co-founder and CEO of Crypto. Emmanuel has advised more than 180 organizations across the private, public, and development sectors, including banking, fintech, retail, education, hospitality, and government. A sought-after voice on macroeconomic trends and their business implications, Emmanuel presents and facilitates conversations that strip away jargon, help leaders map global dynamics to local realities, and equip them with practical frameworks for navigating uncertainty. He is particularly known for translating geopolitical and economic shifts into clear, actionable strategy. And we believe you will find great value in this highly practical webinar this afternoon. Signals, shocks, and strategic communication, guiding CEOs and leaders through geopolitical uncertainty. Our speakers, Adedoyin and Emmanuel, will translate global events into risks, opportunities, and competitive positioning. I now hand over to Adedoyin.
Thank you very much, Rihanna. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you all doing? It's good to see that we have people from different countries across the continent. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Before we go into the conversation today, and like Rihanna beautifully said, when we were discussing the direction for this webinar, Rihanna was like, oh, we need something that will be topical. I was like, look, with the way the world is going, this conversation, not only will it be topical, it will still be very, very relevant. But I want to know in the chat, and you can put emojis, you can put a comment, how many of you feel overwhelmed with all that's happening in the world? You feel like there's just too much happening. You open, maybe it's the news, maybe it's Instagram, war, kidnappings, economic shifts, something happening, and you're just like, we're still trying to get our head around what just happened before. And now there's this something new that has happened, a new policy, cyber hacking. Yeah, I see I see the emojis. Yeah, you can express how you feel. And just imagine for us as communicators, Christiana, I see you. Honestly, that's how I feel. Sometimes I'm like, what is this? What exactly is going on? And we really decided to have this webinar to discuss and unpack some of these things, because while some of it may seem far removed from your context, or this is happening in Iran, this is happening in America, the truth is that some of these things have ripple effects and implications for us in Africa and also for the organizations that we work with. And one thing that we need to know as communications professionals who manage reputation for organization is the potential for increased risk. And so what we're going to be doing in this conversation is creating that context, that awareness. What do you need to know? How do you sift through the jargon so that you don't become overwhelmed, but so that you can see what truly matters and use that to advise your CEOs and your leaders and stay on top of your work as a communicator. So beyond the awareness, we need you to understand how to interpret and contextualize everything that's going on globally, regionally, and also even within your country. How do you know how to turn that data from all of the events into actionable insights that you can use to guide your organizations confidently, remembering that one of the goals or one of the highlights of our role is to become trusted advisors. So this is why we're here, and I'm really, really excited to do a deep dive into this topic with Emmanuel. Anyone that has been with me in recent times, I'm always talking about the session I attended in January. I learned so much. It was so eye-opening. It was clear. It was simple. And I'm going to be handing over now to Emmanuel to share with us how to make sense of all of these shifts that are happening in the world in terms of the indicators, these numbers, these events, what are the implications, and what do we need to pay attention to? And then I will come back because he's going to be talking macroeconomics, geopolitics. I will then come back and we'll start that discussion talking about it from a communications and organizational perspective. So everyone, ladies and gentlemen, please let's warmly welcome Emmanuel as he gives us his presentation.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Okay, first things I do, I set my timer so that I'm within time. So my timer is counting. And so thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to express my deepest appreciation to the IABC team. I'm sorry, I like to pronounce, I'm a bit dyslexic, so I pronounce names better. You forgive me, using things I can remember. But I'd like to thank the organizers for, inviting me to be here. I really thank the warm reception I received and, of course, the privilege to speak before you. So I'm Emmanuel Tarfa. I've been a management consultant for the last 18 years. Now, generally speaking, my style is simplicity. So let me tell you the story. I sit in boardrooms. At the first boardroom I went, there was a macroeconomic presentation I did some I think it was about 3 years ago. So they invited the speakers, and then we spoke. I was like the youngest, least known, and everything. And I was surprised that a lot of the people in the room, when I finished, were like, ah, dude, this was the first time I understood this thing. I'm like, but you guys are like C-suite executives, and what exactly? Then I realized that, whoa, apparently, when business leaders sit in the room, they kind of just keep nodding their heads as if they understand the macroeconomics, but they don't really. So I realized there was a gap. And that now became like a forte for me to break it down. Now, I read economics quite all right, but even when I read it, it wasn't as simple as I understand it now. So I now came to this understanding that there has to be a way to teach people how to understand it. But we're going to go beyond the fundamentals to the actual application for your business, which I will go right into, um, which I'll go right into. So let's get to the heart of the matter. I will just go very quickly and swiftly to my slides. Once again, I thank you all for having me here. Signals, shocks, and strategic communications. So we're going to be looking at how we're going to be guiding CEOs through geopolitical uncertainty, of course, macroeconomic intelligence behind better leadership decisions. So um, now this is not the only lecture or masterclass or session you're going to get on the subject. So I'm not going to shove it down your throat. We're going to take it gradually. I will focus on the fundamentals. And the reason is simple. Once you understand the fundamentals, you will create magic. Let me repeat myself. When you understand the fundamentals, you will create magic. What do I mean? I'm sorry, I'm going to use examples. Some of you may not be big fans, and I'm not necessarily a fan. I'm just saying, Elon Musk, grew up in South Africa, among other things. He's a rocket scientist. I mean, he built SpaceX. He understood the fundamentals, so he could strip away the inefficiencies and land a rocket backwards because he understood the fundamentals. So, things that people say hasn't been done were cracked within that time. And there's several other examples of people who look very intelligent, but they just understand the fundamentals. So I'm going to explain that trick to you very shortly. And I think if there's anything you want to learn from this session, is how to understand fundamentals. So here's the outline. Don't worry, you're going to get the slides. I'm very generous with my slides. The world has enough information. There's too much information already. So there's nothing, I'm not going to be hiding information from you. It's fine. Don't worry, you can have it. I can be that generous. But that's what I like to note. Number one, why communications, need geopolitical intelligence, understanding the fundamentals, understanding global shocks, reading the signals, understanding the outlook for 2026, then your own role as a communicator or a strategic communicator, then also learn to turn signals to leadership insight, from global shock to stakeholder trust, and of course, final lessons for you distinguished leaders on the call. Let's get to it. So why communicators need geopolitical intelligence. I will start by saying that CEOs are asking for what does it mean for us? Everybody can read the news now. And everybody's paying attention to the news. So you have to be able to join the group of people who can explain the implication for us. How do I mean? Every economic event is now a narrative event. So, it presents risks. That's number two. These risks, cannot be silent. We can't be silent about them. So, for instance, the CEO of Anthropic boldly said, about 50% of the white collar jobs will be wiped out. Now, you need to remember, you and I are white collar knowledge workers. All of us on this call, starting from yours truly. So, what does that mean for us? Some of us have started to feel it in our businesses. Clients are asking for skin in the game. They don't just want you. They dictate all those fancy analysis we charge per hour, billable hours. It has changed. So the sooner we have those conversations, but what does that mean for our employees? How do we communicate? What's the plan for the organization? So that's where communicators come in, and I can go on and on. So a seat definitely will be earned through fluency, not function. So the communicator who reads the macroeconomic picture becomes the advisors, leaders. They consult before they decide. So they consult you before they then decide on what happens. But I think what I want to emphasize is, and that's why I'm very happy I was invited to participate. And I think it's very strategic of the leaders of IABAC, Africa chapter, to put this together because they want to increase your premium in the market. They want to increase your voice in the boardroom. Otherwise, if you don't understand this important, it almost like you get lost in the conversation. So let me give you an example. When we're growing up as kids, and if adults were talking, there's a way they relegate. They relegate us and say, "You won't get it. You won't understand." And that comes from maybe even if we're curious and we're asking good questions, but because we lack so much context and we're young and our minds can't understand or comprehend, they just rather spare us that. You don't want to be a communicator, strategic communicator in a room or in a leader, and the room is sort of just when we say, central banks just are reviewing monetary policy rates, and you're like, okay, what does that mean? Or you make a passing comment that looks very, ignorant. They would just say, you know what, just they would just, continue talking, and that's not a good place to be, and that's why I want to focus on the fundamentals. Now let's begin. This is my signature section, fundamentals. So let me explain something, and this will help you. To master a complex subject, the way, if you want to master a complex subject, master it like the way you master language. Start with the alphabets and then build to the story. So, man, what do you mean? Now, the letters are A to Z, and I'm going to explain it in the context of what I'm saying. So typically, just picture this. When you come in, when you're learning a new subject, especially in a discipline that is not maybe your forte, or you don't have an interest, or it's not something, for instance, you read law, and I'm sorry, I'm using an example like law, and you have to do math, mathematics, you have to do analysis, you have to do calculations. I know how lawyers react. Or you read sociology or even mass comm or any of the communication courses, and you're supposed to look at financial statements. There's the way you just switch off and be like, I don't understand. But let me give you the hack. This is the way people usually learn. They learn A, F, Q, R, P. So you come for a webinar, they tell you P. You go for a masterclass, they tell you F. You open a magazine, you see B. And then your office is saying WXYZ. So you're lost. You're like, I don't get it. Your alphabets are being thrown at you. What if you sat down and you understood the A to Z of every subject? Let me repeat myself. In other words, if you had an idea of the full scope of this subject fundamentally first, and when I say fundamentally, A, B, C, D to Z, then you have a full picture and so you're no longer confused about what is missing. So when you're presented QRS, you know, okay, well, we started from A before we got here. So my point is see the full scope. Now, when you finish that, which is in this case, the indicator, so growth, inflation rates, currency debt, I'll explain all that shortly, then you now know how they translate to impact and then to signals and impact. Let's move to ABC. So you finish A to Z. You now say, what if we form short words? Boy, girl, come, apple, orange. Like, what do you mean? From there, you graduate to sentences. From sentences, you graduate to story. So think about it. This is how communication happens. And I'm using your own discipline to explain this. You start from ABC, then you get to full narrative, full story. So picture someone in his 50s learning a new language, a very difficult African language. Look at the journey to get to that point. It's the same concept, but they must first begin with the fundamentals. So what am I saying in essence? When you take up any new subject, including the one I'm about to show you, look for the A to Z of that subject. Then move to the simple words, then move to the sentences, then move to... Now, I'm not talking about them literally. This example I'm using is not literal. It's an analogy to say you build on the complexity. But the challenge is people get impatient, or they, in the sake of, respectfully, maybe a bit of ignorance, they jump for the complex stuff. They want to start telling stories on this subject. So you want to start learning economics and you want to start from the story point when you don't understand basic terms like, demand, supply, prices. So that's how it goes. Basic, then advanced. So what is the implication for what we're learning now? I will show you the implication in a second. Just watch this now. So there we go. I want to digress and show you the example. So look at just 1 second. Let me go back to my. Before I move, let me first finish my point, then I'll go back. Sorry, just give me a second. So let me conclude the point so that we're clear. What I'm saying is you follow the sequence of learning. So if we're talking about global macroeconomic shocks, what are the two things that are important for us? What must we know? What must we understand? What must we remember? Now, ladies and gentlemen, in macroeconomic analysis, and this is where a lot of my audience, they need to get this, is there are only two indicators that matter. Let me repeat myself. In macroeconomic analysis, there are two indicators you keenly pay attention to. Number one is GDP growth. Number two is inflation. I mean, I'm sure that would surprise you. Number one is GDP growth. Number two is inflation. Now, some of you already know that. I wish there was time to take some poll, but there isn't. So I'll just go ahead and explain, and then you see it. Here is the slide I wanted you to see. Now, I brought this slide out because I want to write on it. Please don't lose me here. This is the fundamental. This is the ABC example I'm explaining. Now, with everything you hear on geopolitics, macroeconomic analysis, this A and B, this is where it leads to. Why? GDP growth rate, which is the growth in the gross domestic product, i.e., the goods and services produced. So all of us on this call are a little economy. We're all paid salaries for work we've done. That work we've done and the price put on it is our contribution to GDP. So this is the picture. If demand drops, right, and GDP is driven, I mean, obviously, is a measure of goods and services that have been made and been paid for. That means demand, effective demand. So if demand drops, it sends a chain reaction. So event planners don't organize events. Food vendors don't get connected. Um, um, market women and men don't get. You can see the chain reaction from drop in demand. So demand determines, economic activity and then leads to employment. So people get employed. I want to take my time to explain this so that you get it. So once demand drops, employment drops, and it affects the entire thing. Now, where does inflation come in? Inflation comes in when the consistent rise in the prices of food items, prices of items, I beg your pardon. Of course, food is a major one. So now there is the Iran-US, the US-Iran war, and energy prices have gone up. So it has increased the cost of goods and services even further. For some African countries that were already feeling the heat, like Nigeria, my own country, we are already taking in more costs. So diesel is now over 2,000 naira. I mean, what does that mean? It's like about 100 and anyway, about $2 or so, almost $2. So it's hurting businesses. So businesses cannot and businesses cannot necessarily transfer all that price to the consumer, because if they did, the consumer will stop buying and then they'll have to lay off people. So can you see the connection? GDP growth rate and inflation. So anytime you hear IMF, a quarterly global economic outlook reports, they will say GDP growth rate, this is what it is. They would say inflation, this is the projection. If you know those two indicators, you know what to do. Now, let me bring it home again, because I want to take a little bit of time to explain this, because it's important in helping you so that you get through the jargon. One more time, GDP, gross domestic product. I will send a note with some of these definitions, but I need you to get the understanding. How is GDP important? It's an effective show of demand. The moment the figure drops significantly, it means people are not buying again. And if people are not buying, it has a chain reaction. Everybody feels it. Even we on this call, some of us will not have jobs. So they won't call me to do consultancy and they won't pay me. And anytime they pay me for consultancy, I spend. I go to the supermarket, I buy a new electronic. That's how the money circulates. So growth must be high. Secondly, for inflation, it is the consistent rise in prices. Now, there's a safe inflation spot, typically 2-3% max, a healthy rise in prices. And it's not all the prices that increase. It's just a healthy general rise in price. But when you're having inflation in double digits, again, like my dear country, everybody feels it. It means things are too expensive. And then the purchasing power of individuals and families significantly reduces, making them not buy again. And then it creates this cyclical. That's why it's now cyclical. So it's like a doom loop of low demand, low purchasing power, and that's why governments they intervene. And when governments intervene, they give like what they call bailouts, or they, give citizens money, maybe like it happened during the COVID pandemic, where people were paid so they could spend. Now that of course was a bit too much. It now created another inflation, and then spiral things in 2001, 2002. So, but anyway, save you all the time. Those are your two indicators. Now, any other thing you hear, and this is important, and this is my theory because my name is behind it. Any other thing you hear are what I call the derivatives or the drivers or the derivatives. So oil prices, exchange rate, global trade and politics, structural issues and subsidies, fiscal debts and deficits, these are all drivers. So when you hear the news, oh, Russia invades Ukraine, that's a potential driver, and that could send energy prices up, disruption, supply chains, I get it, but it was a driver. Now, what does it drive? It drives GDP, it drives inflation. What about derivatives? Derivatives are the outcomes, the things that we eventually see. So unemployment, fiscal deficit, trade balances. And like I said, I'll send you a simple note with all these definitions. So don't worry about that. The key thing I want you to understand is that this is the framework to cracking the macroeconomic environment. Anything else I tell you, anything else you read in the news, you will read it with a clear understanding of, oh, I get it. So when you hear China's housing, they call it bubble. There's a potential real estate bubble in China. So you'll be thinking, what does that mean? So if China has a real estate bubble and things go south and China experiences some sort of economic slowdown, what does that mean? It means that China's economy, China will not be buying much again, because we know when there's a recession, people are not spending, or something is going to disrupt, because China is second largest economy in the world and growing pretty fast, catching up, with the number one. What does that mean? It's a case of if China sneezes, the whole world will catch a cold. So you pay attention to that. Now that's an example of a simple flow from a driver, something you read in the news, and what it eventually impacts. Remember, it impacts GDP or inflation, and those two are what the world tracks. So in your own country, your own drivers and derivatives may vary. In my country, a major driver is oil prices. Why? Because our government's revenue is tied to oil prices. Now, in the US, and other countries, they have diversified government revenue sources. I mean, taxes and other, our own tax system is just recently reformed, and a bill was passed, so we're still catching up. But the idea is that we feel it, so it's important to us. In fact, the budget of the country is benchmarked with the oil prices. Now, for other countries that are commodity heavy, I don't want to mention the names on the call, you'd also know what that means. So when you're reading news, you're thinking these commodities are key, and their prices determine our government's revenue. And when government has a lot of money, government spends on roads, infrastructure, rails. Are you seeing the connection? So the only challenge over the years is that people that give the news or provide the news typically spend too much time talking about the drivers and derivatives. And then when somewhere in between, they're not slipping the GDP, the GDP growth rate and inflation, the two indicators, and then they leave you lost. What they've done is they've done F, Q, P, O, R. So you're lost. So you just shut down. You're like, I don't understand. But what I'm now telling you going forward is that when you listen, you'll be like, this is a driver, this is a derivative, this is a driver, this is a derivative, right? Then you now say at the end of the day, what's the GDP growth rate? So if you hear 3.4, okay, what's 3.4? 3.4 is not, for the world economy is stable, and I'll show you. But for African countries, especially emerging markets, it's not good. We need like 8, 9, 10%. My country is currently at about 4% and getting towards 4.5. They're about, some people predict 5%. That's still not good. That's like 5 over 10. A good number is 9, 10. That's what would take us to the $1 trillion economy. So look at your current GDP growth for respective countries and think, Google it. What is the GDP growth rate for my country for 2020? The prediction from IMF or your central bank. When you see anything below 7, not good. But when you see 8, 9, I promise you, all of us on this call will feel it. You feel it in your salaries, you feel it in your side hustle, you feel it in your, you feel it in all your endeavors. So you see the economy is booming. So the magic number starts from about 7 for emerging markets. China at this point was doing, 8, 9 double digits. India, they were doing like a lot. And that's why they were growing fast. and creating thousands of millionaires and billionaires. I hope you understand that. I mean, Europe has been struggling, and you can tell when you see the numbers, sometimes negative, sometimes 1%, 2%. And it's been tough because, I mean, it's a very old economy and time has gone. And then lastly, of course, like I explained, inflation. Inflation, you don't want anything above 4%, 5% max. Anything above 5%, it's already looking tight. And then for some countries, it's double digits. That's not good. So why have I done this? I've taken my time. I know I took a little time to do this, but I believe from the feedback, this will be the most important part of the session. Every other thing, you need to interpret it through the eyes of this framework that I've taken some considerable amount of time to explain so that you get it. Based on this fundamental understanding, you can now read all the news and you can now contribute more effectively to the conversation. Very quickly, let's look at an example. This is a practical example. So let's look at geography. US, China, Europe, Middle East, Asia. That's geography. Power centers. Look at the power centers. And I want to explain this because you also need to know this. So that when you hear CNN interrupt a news briefing, like they're having like the normal, and they suddenly interrupt and say, breaking news. The Fed chair is about to make a presentation. Some of you are wondering, why are you breaking the news because the Fed chair is talking? Some of you are wondering, is that so important? It is important. Why? Because the US sets interest rates. What are those interest rates? Those interest rates determine the prices at which banks lend or take deposits. So if interest rates go up, then all the portfolio investors in South Africa Stock Exchange, Nigeria Stock Exchange, Kenya, they begin to repatriate their funds to take it to safer shores, I mean, inverted commas, where they will get higher returns. But when the low interest rates are low, they're like, no, let's go. Then they will now be more ambitious because they have to return, return value to shareholders or fund or to their investors. So they have to go look for other emerging markets where they have some interesting, numbers. And okay, let's go. And when they take out those portfolio investments, that means they take our money out of the stock market. We feel it in our foreign direct investments and we feel it in our economy. Some of our central banks are hedging. I mean, they need dollars. So if there's scarcity, it impacts it. That's why you have to pay attention to that. And then also for those African countries that have taken debt, if the interest rates go up, we have to service our debts higher. So we pay more. And when we pay more in debt, it means governments cannot fund education, healthcare, and so on. Are you seeing the connection? So next time you see the Fed chairman talking, you better pay attention. Then we have corporations. I mean, we're talking about likes of, the AI companies that are disrupting the world, whether you ignore them or not. Look at what they've done. They've sent all of us, packing. Just where everything was fine as of 2 years ago, and then suddenly, or 2, 3 years ago, and then boom, suddenly, the world has changed. AI can now do the research I used to charge a premium for. That's the reality. Military alliances, I cannot overemphasize that. You already know that. So when you hear, Russia, Ukraine, I mean, you know the whole drill. Then multinational institutions, also very important. Why are they important? Because some of them have the ability to influence prices because they are the ones, I mean, imagine how many shipping companies exist. And at a point during COVID, you know what happened? Transmission channels. Look at the next level, level 3. Trade, energy, technology, supply chain, capital flows, currency markets. Have you seen that floor? That is where they are transmitted. So we have the players on top. That's where they originate from. Then we have the power centers within the players. Then we have the transmission. That's when you feel. So when you see energy prices, you automatically know what that you're paying more for gas and you feel the pinch. Some of you have had to rethink your holidays because of ticket prices. These are all the reflections of that. The next one now, which is the core thing I told you about, is the key indicator. I don't need to emphasize that because of time. And then lastly, what it means for business and communications impact. So look at your own role. Very important. Number 5, where leaders feel the effect, the real world consequences. Investor confidence. Some of you, one of the things you're going to take away from this session, I know you understand the concept of stakeholder management. It's a very important part of your work, but there is the understanding of the global events to each stakeholder. So investors, to consumers, and how they spend. 3, employment. Now, why is consumer spending important? Let me tell you why. If there is uncertainty, people don't spend. So if people don't spend, all the retail businesses and organizations feel it. And all of us are connected to spending somehow. So if they don't spend, so if because they're uncertain, they'll keep the money. But if there's confidence, certainty, then people bring up money from their pockets and they spend. And that spending is important. Employment, I mean, I don't need to explain that. Corporate reputation, I mean, you guys know that that's important. Cost of operation and how that translates to transferring that price to customers. And then lastly, strategic decisions, which we'll look at a few. And then here is a more practical example. From global shocks to stakeholder trust. So look at a simple event. Look at on my left-hand side, which is the A part, from the decisions. So let's take, for example, Trump announces new tariffs. Just watch. This is a practical example of how you can add value in the room. And I'm going to the crux of it. Global event, external signals. Trump announces new tariffs. Geography is United States. Power center is government policy. Transmission channel is trade. Economic signal is inflation. People are going to pay more. I remember the implication, right? Inflation, not good. High inflation, not good. Business impact. Your input cost rises. Some of you work for organizations that rely heavily on global supply chains and multinationals. And then once the input prices rise, the company cannot invest in capital in certain things. They can increase your salary, they can do a lot of things. So, and the employees will get uncertain. Okay, what's going to happen? We're paying almost so almost half in addition for our inputs. Are we going to transfer that price to the customers? At some point, we can't hold it, we have to. Then the CEO now has to make a decision. Should we increase prices or not? And if we're going to, how do we communicate to all stakeholders? How do we tell our investors that the consumers are not going to react negatively and there'll be a drop in our revenue projections? So they need to hold back their cash. I'm not going to buy more stock. I'm not going to buy more stock. I'm not going to buy ABC stock because I think that they're affected by global shocks and they're going to feel there's going to be a drop in their revenue and it's going to wipe out their retained earnings. And hey, I am not going to try. That's an example of the flow. So as the strategic communications expert, how do we frame it so that investors don't panic and begin to rethink? How do we make people feel that we're resilient and we know what we're doing, that we have it covered? And you truly need to have it covered, by the way. So look at strategic communicators, translates, what you signal into insights, shape decisions, and protect trust. This is here. Are you following me? I'm sure you're following me. If you're following me, give me a thumbs up. I hope you're following the chain of command. And like I said, the slides are yours. Don't worry. Okay, I built them specially for you, especially this particular slide. All right, good. You're following. Now, so I was talking about interpret the signal, what is happening and why it matters. So here's the simple framework. Assess stakeholder impact, customers, investors, employees, regulators, communities, and the media. There you go. Advice leadership, right? What are the implications and options for the businesses? And I'm coming to some of them. Shapes the narrative, crafts clear, honest, and compelling messaging. So obviously the way you write has to change, and protects reputation and trust. That one I need to keep emphasizing. The whole business is built on reputation. If I don't trust you, I'm not going to spend money. The people that invited me to this conference had to take some risk and say, well, we hope Emmanuel knows what he's doing. And I'm sure they won't be disappointed. But the point is that it's that trust. Now, if I come here and I do the wrong thing, I ain't coming back again. And there's a lot of other things that would happen. So trust matters. Same thing for your business. So organizational response, decisions informed by insight, communications with clarity and purpose. So look at what happens in a stakeholder management scenario on the C part. So without strategic communication, customers customers feel exploited, media backtrack and negative narratives, social media outrage, trust declines, employee frustration, and investor confidence drops. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are the words you will now be using in the boardroom. That's your new vocabulary. So, because these are the people directly connected to your global shocks from point A here down to this point. Those are the people feeling it. Now, with strategic communication, clear explanation of the decision. And you will get better at it as you practice. Market context and data provided. So you look at the market. So you're not, you won't say inflation and you keep quiet. You know what inflation is. So you can reference another indicator, another driver, another derivative, and show them the connection and why it will change. So you say, well, central banks are responding quickly to reduce rates. And when they reduce rates, this will manage inflation. So you can respond. Anyway, I'll come back. Empathy and transparency communicated, trust maintained and strengthened, employee understanding and alignment, and then lastly, investor confidence protected. All right, now let's move back to my original slide and complete my chain of thought as I begin to round up. I hope this has been worth it, and I hope you're following my chain of thoughts. So I've explained everything. Like I said, when I give you the slides, you go over them again. So this is all the ABC stuff I talked about, and that's how we got in. So now let's quickly look at the world itself, because I've given you all that for them, and I took my time. It's very important because most times people come present stuff, and like I said it in boardrooms, the most execs don't understand it. They don't understand the fundamentals. So it just looks like a lot of information. But remember two things: derivatives, drivers. What's in the middle? GDP growth rate and inflation. That's all you need to know. Now, you will learn more complex stuff, don't get me wrong, but this is how I've chosen to simplify the ABC for you. When you master them, then you will build and even come and challenge me on some new frameworks, but at least get the fundamentals. Now, let's look at what has happened in GDP growth rate for the world. So here is the last about 10 years. Look at them from 2016 to 2026. What have you noticed? There are two peculiar years, 2020 and 2021. What happened? 2020 was COVID. Simple. So the world had a recession. Full stop. Not a depression, a recession. What's that? It's when you have negative growth in GDP. That's a recession. That means people are not spending, people are. So what did governments do? They pumped money. They gave consumers a lot of, like, I mean, I saw people in Canada, Nigerians in Canada sending pictures and videos. Can you see? I'm just an immigrant. I'm not even a citizen. Look at what they paid me. You know, wait, guy, they paid you so that you could stay at home and not go rob shops. That's why they paid you. And they understand that, right? So when you have money, you know, Amazon made a lot of money because they were delivering and people were buying online. That's what happened. So that's what governments, now when governments pumped in that money, you can see the 5.9%. It came out from a negative. So that growth rate is the rate at which it changes. Remember, rate at which it changes. So it threw it back to 5.9. So it like really, really rose because money was, people spent money, businesses made money. And then, you know, more things were manufactured. So there was growth. But what do you notice? It's been stable, very largely 3.3, 3.8. It's within the 3% range. So it means, and you have to understand that the world economy is conglomeration, it is a conglomerate of all the economies. So there are some that, like so China, India, and some African countries that are driving the 8, 9, 10% range. But we now have the likes of Europe that in the 1%, 0.9, 2%, and the US, which is about, I think, 3% thereabout, that are now moderating it. But they are larger economies. So they are pulling down those numbers and moderating it. We have the Middle East also. So that's why it averages around that. But it doesn't mean that some countries are growing, that most countries are growing. My country is projected to do 4.5 to 5% this year. So it's higher than the global average. So these are the things you need to understand. All right. Now look at inflation. 2 years also, very 2021 and 20. Why not 2020? I know, I wish some of you had time, I would have asked you to answer that question. It's because after you pumped in money, you've given citizens money, the next thing is going to happen is inflation. There will be too much purchasing, there will be too much money chasing fewer goods. Too much money in the hands of people running around, and they have more money than things to buy. So what happens? Prices go up because people know that people have money. So, oh, everybody has money. Let's raise our prices. There's too much demand. Oh, I want this hair. I just have 3 left. And it's 800K. I'll give you 850. Oh, I want to pay for rent. There are only 2 houses left. How much is it? 2.5 per month. I'll give you 3K. Knock off the other person. That's how prices start to rise. People have money and they're negotiating hard. And what does that cause? It causes growth in inflation. Look at the inflation rate of the world. That's 2022, 8.6. So all the central banks started scrambling to increase interest rates. What does it mean? And I'm also teaching technical stuff, but follow me. Why did they increase interest rates? They increased interest rates because, and this is the way it works, because this is important. When you increase interest rates, it means you are increasing the amount of money depositors, investors, although depositors actually can, and also the minimum funds that banks can keep in their account. I want to keep very simple terms you can understand. So in other words, every bank is supposed to keep some money with the central bank. So when you increase monetary policy and also other indicators along that line, it means the banks would not lend out much because they are forced to keep a certain amount. So if they don't lend out, businesses don't get money to do business, which is not a good thing. My time is up, so I'll start running up. Businesses don't get enough money to do what they want, which is not good for growth. But at the same time, that's what you need to mop up funds from the system so that people, you take the money off the hands of people so that they don't go around negotiating higher rates, like the example I gave, which is a very simple example for you to understand, and then forcing people to keep more. So let's take the money out of circulation. That's what it means when they say increase the monetary policy rate. So we increase deposit rate. So people are now, oh, let's go save, let's go invest. So government issues out bonds or whatever, and then people are, okay, let's take money out, let's pull back the money. But when you decrease interest rates, it means there's more money in the market. People can go borrow money, people can spend money, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the difference. So next time you see the Fed chair, the CBN governor, that's what they're moderate. They handle what is called fiscal policy. So monetary policy, sorry, not fiscal. Monetary policy. Money. Remember that, money. The fiscal policy has to do with government revenue and expenses. That's fiscal. 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 Government revenue is different. That's your finance minister. In the US, I think that will be your treasury, I believe, or so. Correct me if I'm wrong. I need to remember that. I always mix that up. So what does that mean? It means taxes, higher taxes, and more expenses, government expense. So let's build bridges. Let's give scholarships. Let's build roads. Let's build factories. That is government spending to stimulate the economy. All right, don't forget that. So that's what happens in this, and those are numbers. What have you? Inflation has been a bit up and down. Now it's projected to be 3.7 in 2026, which is a moderate rate. A good number, like I told you, is 2.53 there. Now, why is inflation moderated? Because it's being driven by the inflation rate of the bigger boys, right? US, China, and they are typically, but if they use Africa's, like my country and other countries, the inflation rate would, because my country is about 15% as at the last time. Now, very quickly, the 7 signals every strategy communicator should watch. There's 7 here, and I close in 5 minutes. Number 1, geopolitical conflict. I took my time to explain. It's very important because once you understand, you can now read everything on the screen. If I came straight here, like most of my economic colleagues do, they will lose you. And I don't know why they keep doing that. You're not economists, so I need to bring it down to your level. So what are these 7 signals? Geopolitical conflict. And you know what that means? It's just conflict. It means when people fight, when 2 elephants fight, the ground suffers. So it could be anything. It could be energy prices today. It could be, I mean, like Trump calling out, canceling USAID, and what happened. I mean, a lot of, NGOs, some of businesses like my hospitality client felt it because, they're located in a very, in an area where non-government organizations, NGOs, especially, USAID-led projects were operating, and they felt it really badly. I can go on and on. So that's the implication. So what do? You build resilience, you diversify your options against particular geopolitical players. So if you had a particular client that is in the US or Europe or any exposed market, you diversify. And that's what Apple is doing, for instance, by exploring India as an alternative manufacturer. Imagine just waking up one day and there are no iPhones. Oh, there's no iPhone 18 because Apple couldn't manufacture. I mean, they can't afford that. Why? Because Australia, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, our sovereign wealth funds, some of them have invested in Apple stocks. So do you get the connection now? It's a whole global. So when you hear the first thing they read out in the news is the global markets. Okay, S&P, they're telling you where is your pension? Your pension, your sovereign wealth fund, some of your own personal investments are in these stocks. So you better see where they're going. That's all. That's all. Energy and commodity prices. I cannot emphasize that. Africa is a heavy commodity and energy driven. I mean, like my country, oil. Some of you is gold. Some of you is cocoa, rubber. So you see that, right? Copper, mine, and so on. Inflation and interest rates. How will consumers, employees? I've explained this point, so pay attention to that. Trade wars and regulations. Who is fighting and what? All right. 5, AI and workforce disruption. I mean, they're going IPO. I'm sure you're following the news. Big stuff. So what does that mean? Start telling your children to learn plumbing, electrical work. I don't know. I mean, we have to be that practical. I mean, that's on a lighter note. But the point is, it is not necessarily going to displace people. It is people who use AI. I'm sure you should have heard this by now. It's people who use AI that will take over the jobs of people who don't use AI. It's not that we still need to work together with AI, And AI is also quite expensive, I must tell you. I mean, if you think about the tokens and all of that. China and supply chains. China essentially has to be healthy and stable. If China coughs, we'll all feel it. So what do you pay attention to China? You pay attention to the news in China. What is the Chinese government doing? I think I'm kind of thankful that the Chinese government is a bit chilled, at least for now, as we've seen. They're not in a hurry. We don't know whether they will invade Taiwan and what that will mean for the world. That's the next potential hotspot. Will the US step in or not step in? Those are things you look out for. Trust media and information risk. So what do I mean? Of all the things I said, it's around trust because of fake news and all the other things associated with that. Fake narratives, biased narratives. You have to be objective and put aside your personal biases. So pay attention to critical thinking and problem solving. Lastly, the discipline. Don't track headlines. Track the few signals that move your stakeholders. So you map your industry, you look at all the indicators. So when I give you these slides, you take it, and then you carefully look at all all the things that affect your own industry. For those of you who work for multinationals, supply chain is a big deal for you. For some of you who do business with governments, it will be the way governments behave. For some of you who do business with just one region, maybe like 50% or 70% of your customers are just maybe North America or Europe or China alone. That's a risk. You need to diversify. So the alternative to China is India. The alternative to America is Europe or China itself. What about other South American countries? You need to begin to think and look at that broadly in your understanding first so that you can contribute to the conversation. All right. Now, what are the predictions? I will leave this for you to read. And where do these land us? Well, currency debt, commodities, trade, and AFCT alignment, all of that will be read. I want to just close out with this. From messenger to advisor, this is what you need to do. Right? Briefed after the decision is made. That's what is to happen before. Packages and distributes the messages. Measured by output, release, coverage, reach. That's the kind of thing that communicators may pay attention before. Reacts to events as they break, owns the channel. But look at what you should be looking at tomorrow. Or today, in the room before the decision. So you already know, you've read the news, you understand it. Frames meaning, risk, and stakeholder impact. Measured by outcomes, trust, license to operate. All right, anticipate signals and prepares leaders. And then lastly, owns the judgment. So what do? You need to have options. You don't just show up and say, well, this is it, oh guys, go figure it. No. You land with options. And AI is your friend. But at least you now know the questions to ask. All right. So the edge isn't more information, it's better interpretation, connecting a global signal to decisions that leaders has to make in this quarter. Turning signal, I gave you more insights and examples. So here's a good framework for you to work with. Don't worry about it. I will share the slide. I don't want to. So you look at them from geopolitics to what to watch, the communication actions, and the priority stakeholders. That's also yours because it's text heavy. You can read it. And I also like to give you something to read after. It's kind of way of it's my own style. I don't want to start dictating stuff, but when you go through and meditate on some of the things we've learned today, you will see how this framework can help you. It's like a little playbook I cannot design just for you guys. I don't have this slide anywhere else. You can see your name is all over the place. So at least, my Christmas, well, not Christmas, my media gift to you. So from global shocks to stakeholder trust, as I close, a global event hits, you detect it early, you brief the room, leaders speak clearly, and then confidence holds. Stakeholders stay with you through the uncertainty. Thank you very much, everyone. I think I will stop here. In uncertain times, the communicator's job is not to predict the future, but prepare leaders for it. Thank you guys and sorry I took a little bit of I hope this was worth it, and I hope you learned something.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I'm seeing the emojis, and yes, somebody says that you simplified it so well, and that's really what we wanted. And I hope that as Emmanuel was speaking, you were already seeing connecting points with your organization, whether you work with a for-profit organization or you're working with a non-profit organization. The reality of it is that stakeholder events or geopolitical events, macroeconomic events, they have implications for whatever organization. And I like that he simplified it. He said derivatives, drivers, GDP growth, inflation. And the key thing is, what does this mean? What is the ripple effect on stakeholders? And which means for us as communicators, our stakeholder mapping, you know how we have that, our stakeholder mapping, keep informed, you have using that matrix. It means that when you do your stakeholder mapping, it's not a static document anymore. It's something that you need to go and revisit. How are these events? If there is a war, if there is an increase in pricing, if there is inflation, how is it impacting on investors? Are investors bringing in money? Is your company about to raise money and then investors are not investing? As consumer spending increased, if you are in the FMCG or any business where you are selling goods and services, if consumer spending has decreased, that has a ripple effect. So you're now beginning to think and say, oh, this has an implication. And we're not saying that you should go and solve the problem, no, but we're saying that you need to pay attention. You need to be speaking as well with your colleagues in other departments, risk, sales, legal, and flag things, especially with regards to stakeholder sentiment. Organizations now, CEOs, they have very difficult decisions to make. They're not always easy decisions because, like we've heard, anything, like literally tomorrow, we can wake up and something happens that disrupts the entire value chain, and they have to make quick decisions. But the reality is that the high-level decisions impact on employees, the high-level decisions impact on public trust, the high-level decisions also impact on perception and reputation, which are the things we need to be mindful about. So all of the things that we've learned, I hope it helps you to understand why you need to know it better. We're going to go into a time of Q&A shortly. But Emmanuel, as I was taking down notes and me now wearing my hat as a communicator, you were given the example of lawyers, that lawyers don't like numbers. Yeah, a lot of communicators don't like numbers. I think more people are getting to understand why they need numbers. So you've told us what we should be looking at, what we should be paying attention to. And someone may just be there and say, Emmanuel, I'm just trying to learn communications now, which is evolving. I have to learn AI. I have to learn data analytics. I have to learn this. Now you are telling me I have to learn about geopolitics, macroeconomics. How can people strengthen their knowledge in this space so that they become more comfortable and it's not daunting to start learning and it's not overwhelming as well? Because it's something you should know about communicators. We have a lot of work on our plate. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
All right, thank you very much. I think Rihanna had said that I should sell my market. Let me put it in inverted commas. In other words, that's a slang in Nigeria to say, tell them what you do. So, Crypto is a startup focused on some of these things. But what I would say is two things. For now, this will sound very direct, but follow me on every channel. Follow me on IG, Instagram, Tarfa Emmanuel or Emmanuel Tarfa. Follow me on LinkedIn. Those are my two active channels, right? And if you come close enough, you get WhatsApp. But let's say if you just follow my story, my line of thoughts. Now I will share some notes. Like I said, I'll just dictate them. Obviously, I will use some AI to finish it, but I will just give you definitions and all of that. Simple, like a small textbook I'll create. And no shame at all. I'll create it with Claude, but it will help you. Now, the ABC example I gave is very important in understanding everything. When you see a new subject, look for the definition, look for the scope, look for the example and use case, and then use for application. So this is my example. What is photosynthesis? Types of photosynthesis, process of photosynthesis, example of photosynthesis. That is primary school grade learning of simple concepts. So anybody who sounds engineers, and with all due respect, mathematicians and like economists, people who sound very abstract and smart, they only know what I said. What is it? The scope, the example. Now, if you do that for any subject, you get it. Don't forget, some of you, everybody's smart. As long as you're mentally stable, you know it. The problem is AFQRST. So that thinking is very important. Number two is you need to learn to listen to the news. Now, I know we don't like the news, bad news and stuff, but let me be very direct. You need two local news stations, two global news stations that give you information on your pestle, political, economics, social, technical, legal, and environmental. My Claude, I use Claude. It gives me daily briefings, even though I skip a lot, where it just summarizes the pestle of the day. Oh, political parties are rallying, blah, blah. I just quick updates. I need to know. You can't be in the room and you won't hear somebody was impeached. It's a bit, people don't respect people that don't know what's going on. And it's because the world is not driven by our textbooks. It's driven by the reality of whatever is going out there. Our textbooks are there to help us solve the problems, but they're not the definition of the problem. So your pestle, political, economic, social, technical, legal, and environmental, from the lenses of the news. So this is my own recipe. I'm sorry I'm going to call names, but it will help some of you. I use BBC. I use BBC podcasts because I listen more. If you're a reader, then go to the website. BBC is a bit broad, global. Al Jazeera, I also like Al Jazeera. There's something called Counting the Cost. I'll give you all those shows. Pick your two shows. The name of the game is consistency. It's not so much of spreading yourself across multiple channels, Financial Times, Bloomberg, you'll be stretched. But if you pick two sources and you're consistent, do two global sources, what will happen is you will get the full cycle. It's a cycle. So if you stick to BBC, It's a cycle. They will come around and give you all the information. But if you touch BBC today, you move to Bloomberg tomorrow, you come to CNN, you will miss out on the point on the cycle, because it's a cycle. It's like the sun going around. Oh, sorry, the earth going around. I beg your pardon. Not the sun. The sun doesn't move. Do you understand? So I mean, very direct. BBC. For local, I use Arise and I use channels. That's for local, for my own country. You find what works for your own country, but you need to know the pestle of your country, the political. I hate the political news. I don't really enjoy it. I feel it's too, but I have to listen, because I can't be in rooms and they're talking what's going on and I'm absent-minded. No, it's not good on my career. It's not good on my level. So I think I've said it all. Understand the fundamentals, but more importantly, you have to follow your pestle. So general knowledge, i.e. just read newspapers. That's the simple trick. That's the simple trick.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I love that answer, and I can really attest to that. So I used to be in that WhatsApp group of not listening to or not liking to listen to the news, because bad news, or like it's too much. But I started every single day while I'm working. Mine is Sky News. I would just put it. And honestly, in the last 2 years of listening to the news every day, listening to opinions come to analyze, or opinion analysts, they bring in analysts that will analyze what's going on. It's been really, really helpful. So pick your own channels. Stay consistent while you're working, put it on, just listen. It really does help you to understand the jargon. And another thing I like about this conversation is I hope we can see how it is helping us to really elevate our conversation, elevate our language, especially when we're talking about dealing with CEOs and boards. We talk about having a seat at the table a lot, but the reality is that these are the things that they talk about. So if you go there, you don't understand what Emmanuel just said about your pestle. If I've taken that, I'm going to create my own dashboard now, pestle of the day, and get AI to help me to update that. So how do you make sure that you understand what's going on within your country, within the geopolitical context, the economic context? What are the implications for our stakeholders? Then you start flagging, hey, this is important. This is the ripple effect. You see, before they do a meeting, they will call you. They will not call you after the meeting, because you're now proactive, because you are now informed, because you are now learning. So this webinar, we really wanted it to be very, very practical, so that you're armed with that information to really elevate conversations within your organization, elevate your role as well. Some people are jittery about, oh, would AI take my role? But the reality is that I hope you can see the strategic thinking that comes into it, the connecting of the dot that still needs you as the human. But the thing is, are you paying attention? Are you seeing how this connects to the bottom line for your organization and the role that you have to play? So we're going to go into our Q&A now. I hope that you all have your questions. I will hand over back to Rihanna, who will help us to coordinate the Q&A. Rihanna?
Hi there. So I think from my side, as we were talking and mentioning news and stakeholders and the impact of everything happening around the world, looking at your own organization and understanding your stakeholders, Adedoyin, you mentioned the stakeholder mapping and pinpointing emerging issues. Sometimes something is not yet an issue, but it's developing. And the secret is to know the difference between something that may evolve and disappear and something that sticks. And that takes a lot of, I think it takes an intuition, it takes a gut feel, and it takes experience as well, Adedoyin. Mentioning also the media channels that we need to keep an eye on, understanding which media channels are most trustworthy, because we also have influencers that share opinions, but then we have hardcore journalists that report on facts, understanding the difference between the two, but also understanding that sometimes influencers could potentially start an emerging issue. Is that not so, Adedoyin? And Emmanuel, please, if you want to add to this comment or this sort of discussion, go for it.
That's very true. And it's also an emerging skill, not an emerging skill, but it's a competence that we all need to develop, issues management, because people talk a lot about crisis, but the reality is that badly managed issues that you didn't pay attention to, issues that you ignored or just thought, oh, this is not a big deal, then spirals and escalates into a crisis. So you're really, really spot on with that, Rihanna. And I see we have some questions now in the chat. Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, go for it, Adedoyin.
Okay. So Emmanuel, we have a question from Efe, which says, Could Emmanuel do a practical example of the slide where he showed how comms professionals could respond to happenings on the global stage? So if we wake up tomorrow and the big guy in the US has decided to bomb another country, how practically should communications professionals respond? So Emmanuel, are you able to respond to that?
Yes, I am here. So I obviously I said a couple of it and I put that in tech in some of the slides. Let me just, let me I think I did it in this slide, but let me try again so that let me project my screen very quickly so that I will help, because I'm also looking at time. And I mean I'm here, but we'll give it a shot. Let me do that in 1 minute. So this is what I'm saying. I use this example to say, now I know this is a bit busy, but look at the flow from 1 to 5, starting from geography, right? Where it happened and all the powers that be. So you follow the news. And the news can come from anywhere. It could be a central bank matter, it could be a military alliance issue, and so on and so forth. China decides to back Russia in the Ukraine war, things change. But I think what I wanted to say is, for communicators, this is look at it. Look at the people and the things you need to ascribe. So this is your goal, the outcome, the impact. Investor confidence. Investors are important. If you work for a publicly traded company, that's important, right? Some of you work for multinationals as such. So investor confidence, or partner confidence if you're an NGO, right? Or your partners, your donors, and so on and so forth. 2, consumer spending. So you want to check how strongly tied your company is to consumer spending. So your goal is to, and I'll say very plainly, one of the things I am good at is I don't like to hide. I like to speak very freely, right? I mean, I don't want to say more than that. But in this world we live in a world of a US president type, and based on his personality, it's an era that fosters, for some of us, more direct talk. That's it. What I mean by that is be willing to just say it, of course, respectfully, and of course be politically correct. And this is what I'm about to say. Use your AI very well. What you didn't know how to do before is you didn't know what to ask AI. But now I've taught you. So if you take this framework, you place it in your chat, and I'm very, very practical, and you say, this is what has happened. This is my road is coming. Give me the bullet points. And then on bullet points on what? You present a framework to it. So you present the actual issue. And then you keep interrogating it, and it will refine your thoughts. That's what it means. A human that works with AI will take over the job of a human that doesn't use AI. Because now that you know the fundamentals, you can query it and say, at least you know inflation, you know GDP. So you're not lost in the room. That's what I want to practically tell you, because I don't like to hide too much knowledge. It's that real. Why, before, what you would have had to do is you get 2-3 analysts, tell them to do research for you, send you the report, read the 50 pages, make a decision. AI will do all that for you. Or you just will tell CEOs, this is what I think. Now, it may give you initially, depending on what AI tool you use, generic answers. So your job is to probe for that and say, you keep probing further until you get to more specifics. Now, what it typically may not do, it may not have context. So you give it context. You say, this is my organization, this is what happens. But what I've given you is the framework, right? Either this or this. And I'm going to give you the slides where you literally just put them in and say, what do we do? So you say, for instance, what does it mean for consumer confidence? So for consumer spending in our business, what does it mean for investor confidence? How do we convince our investors? And then you tell this to the finance team, tell this to the branding team, tell this to the engineering team. That's clear message. Even to the emails that should be sent to the teams of what to say to respond to customers, what to say to respond to investors. It changes the dynamics, ladies and gentlemen. Trust me. And I'm not shy to say that's how to go about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Emmanuel. Yeah, go for it, Rihanna.
No, I just wanted to thank Emmanuel. That is absolute spot on. Emmanuel, see, we have a question here from Christine asking, is there a list of things, emerging issues that we need to be aware of? You mentioned pestle, but can you be more specific? Would this refer to, for example, something like the Ebola virus? Let's think about that for a minute. The Ebola virus is traditionally contained in the DRC, yet it's spreading now to neighboring countries. We've seen the United Nations, the World Health Organization flagging this as a very serious concern at the moment. So no one had the Ebola virus on their radar because traditionally it's contained in a specific region, yet now things start to culminate. Canada and so on calling it quits, saying, guys, we're closing, we need to be careful. Do you want to just comment on that quickly, Emmanuel? It's not typically something that you would put on your radar, yet because of news analysis, it seems to be a developing issue.
Yes. So now you're asking important questions, right? And the way I answer it matters. And I'm going to keep reinforcing some of the things I highlighted. The answer is this. Number one, you can't stop watching the news. So when my colleagues, mostly younger colleagues, are like, hey, they're just like, hey, I don't want to. I say, guys, listen, welcome to adulthood, right? That's what it means to be an adult. You have to find a way to manage your mental health, but you cannot not know. Now, what is the implication? Currently, as I'm talking to you, I'm taking this. I'm currently in the UK, right? I came in yesterday, and I didn't want to move my trip because I had an important. But I suspected that there's a high probability that it's going to hit aviation very soon, or there are going to be stringent screening processes across airports. So what does that mean? It means anybody that needs to travel, right, needs to move their trips backwards. So that's the first thing you want to tell everybody in the organization, especially if your organization is travel heavy. Number two is anybody that think about a closing of airports, a slow in aviation. What would that mean for your industry? Think about any business you're doing between Africa because there's likely going to be a close of borders. So those are the things to look out for. Then you also need to go and stick to the WHO websites to see what's going on with vaccines and what are the options. And then how did this stem or control the last ones that happened? So I think simple examples but that's how you quickly rearrange and say, hey, now if you're in the business, maybe you work online, everybody's remote, you guys are not really fine. But if aviation slows down, it just has a way of creating this spiral effect. And like I told you guys, and I'm sorry to use the example because I have had to develop thick skin. So I don't know how you're going to learn your own thick skin. And maybe we can take that offline. But it's almost like I'm a bit cold. Otherwise, we can't survive the news. We just trying to recover from Iran, US, and then Ebola. Like it's not on the list. And ladies and gentlemen, before December, something may be through. So I'm sorry to scare you. Welcome to adulthood.
And it seems that the Huntum virus has disappeared because there's no media reporting on the Huntum virus. I don't know if the rats are behaving, but something shifted on that side.
Yes. So it's kind of like, not to scare you, but your own is just, well, I didn't say the best thing to tell you guys. I don't want to come and lie to you and tell you to be all well. It's going to be, you're going to hear wars, famines, and rumors of wars. But what do? You protect your sanity. You pick what's important for your business. And so you focus on things that are important. Your children, your family, your friends, your relationships, your nature. Go to the beach, go to the forest, and just breathe. That's my simple recommendation.
And I think also to Adedoyin's point earlier, to understand your business inside out. Understand the environment, the macro environment that it's operating in, the micro environment that it's operating. Understand your stakeholders as much as possible. Adedoyin, do you want to jump in here? It's really that stakeholder mapping, but really understanding the nature of your business inside out. Is it not so?
Most definitely, and even more so now, it is very, very critical. We cannot get away with not even understanding our industry and the implication of some of the things that Emmanuel has shared and all the things that you would hear and would see in the news and the things that would happen eventually. What is the ripple effect? But another thing that really struck me as I was listening to Emmanuel Rihanna is that this emphasis on cross-functional collaboration, because we know comms, we like to bury our head, do our own thing. But if you want to really have this enterprise-wide understanding, you have to be collaborating with different departments. I remember a client that I had in the financial services sector, and I was speaking to the head of communications, and she was telling me how they were about to send something out to their clients, but they had to run it by the investor relations team to fact check, hey, is this right? Are the figures right? Did we understand this concept properly? So there's also that need to make sure that we are asking the right questions within the organizations, going to the teams to say, hey, Eagle, this is what it is. Risk, this is what we're seeing. What are you seeing from your end? So that era of just being siloed in our work, we now need to, and you know that the thing about it is that when you come to an expert, so with Emmanuel, for example, if you come to him with speaking geopolitics and economy, so it's going to be like, okay, this person kind of gets it. They'll more likely open up and be as generous as Emmanuel has been with us today. And they'll give you the information that you need. So don't feel like you have to know everything, because I feel like some people here are like, this is a lot. Where do we start? But just know, I like the framework that Emmanuel has given us, being able to leverage AI to get the information that you need, but also leverage on the internal departments whose core focus areas are some of these things, and immerse yourself in those conversations and ask the right questions. I think that that's something that I would really like everyone to take away.
Yeah. Adedoyin, something that I'm also picking up at the moment, Emmanuel, I don't know if you want to add something to this, is a term coined shareholder activism, where shareholders are pushing back and keeping corporates and their leadership teams accountable on various different levels, be it ethics, be it controls of finances, all these other bits and pieces that play a part. And you see that particularly at AGMs these days, where the shareholders would, in past, earlier times, would have approved and signed off on specific decision making. We're now seeing shareholders pushing back and saying, we need more information, we need more transparency. Is this something that will continue? Do we see an increase in shareholder activism where they keep leaders and CEOs accountable for decision making?
Simple answer, yes. Simple answer, it will continue. I'm not going to say more than that, except you want more. But yes, and it will, it will even go worse now in the social digital media era, among other things. And we also, we don't really have very strong leaders that can push back as much as possible. I mean, the likes of Steve Jobs and so on and so forth, Of course, Elon Musk is strong, but a CEO's capacity to push back matters. And you only push back when you're delivering consistent value, then you have a negotiating or bargaining chip or bargaining power to have that conversation. Full stop.
Absolutely. I have no further comments to make. I'm just having a look here in the chat box. Adedoyin, is there anything that you just want to comment?
Yes, I just wanted to jump on what you just said, that beyond the shareholder activism, we should also know that we're in this era where people are now more vocal. They're now more vocal on social media platforms. This is not the era of dismissing somebody's complaint or comment because, hey, they have only 100 followers. They're not important. They are very important. In fact, that thing they're complaining about, that issue, it can easily skyrocket into a crisis if it's not properly managed. So I think that based on everything that we've learned, we have to make sure that we are listening, have your ears to the ground, your monitoring tools. I always tell communications professionals, you need to have Google Alerts for your company. You have to be doing your environmental scanning, use the tools, Brand24. There's so many tools so that you're picking up these conversations that are going on. As you are picking up the news, you're also picking up what your stakeholders are saying, what's the public saying, what is the sentiment, because these are the insights that you're going to feed back to your CEO, your organizations, if they want to do a particular initiative and you can see that, hey, there's agitation within the community or the country we want to go to, it is you that needs to tell them, hey guys, this is not the right time for this. And of course, you come with your data, and that is very, very critical. So I just wanted to add that to that stakeholder points that you mentioned.
That's fantastic. Thank you for reminding us, Adedoyin. Do not downplay social media. We've seen where in the past certain elements or certain issues were ignored on social media platforms, including the more controversial ones like X, only to be found in a massive, huge crisis where PR was pulled in as damage control. And that we want to avoid at all costs. I have a comment here. I don't know if you want to read this. We have a comment in our chat box.
Okay, I can read it.
Thank you.
So it says, please, could you share your 1 cent in particular for someone like me who works within an advertising agency network? My context is I work with a large communications network that cuts across regional and global spaces, and we deal with local and global clients and regulators and vendors. That's a lot. Anybody amongst you? Okay, our stakeholders are very conservative, and that really makes us mindful of communications, but I've been able to mitigate crisis by 100%. Okay, so Olalekan, is the question, how do you apply all that Emmanuel has said within your context, where you work within an agency that you're dealing with global, regional clients with different stakeholder sensitivity? Just give me a yes or a no so that I know that we're in the right direction, and I will hand it to Emmanuel to share. Yes, okay, yes. So Emmanuel, if you could please just share your insights. So, and there are people probably like Olalekan as well that work in agencies where they're not just dealing with one client, they're dealing with multiple clients who are in multiple regions, multiple locations, and the sensitivities are very different. So how can someone like Olalekan apply what you've just shared to their context?
Right. Thank you very much. Now, there's a way I like to present. I'm not a teacher, but I'm very deliberate about how I manage short presentation. I mean, we just have 90 minutes. This could have been a full day session in Radisson Blue or Radisson Hotel, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. for all you care, 2 days. We could have done this. But if we have 90 minutes, what am I going to do to help people? Is I pick a very few set of points. So I reduce my breath. 1, 2, 3. Then I keep digging. So I realize I'm repeating myself, but I'm reinforcing the point. Now, when you crack it, it would unlock you into, because what I always try to focus is how do you, and I say this with also really, how do you think like the way I'm thinking? So I will show you how I understood it. Then I'll now tell you, so let me now answer the question. Based on everything I've said, your pestle. Because if you are paying attention to pestle, global and local, by the way, not just your local, global. If you're talking to a client who has a social factor impacting their business, and you're paying attention to the issue in China, you can connect the dots. So when you look at something, you say, well, the problem with Japan is aging population. You can have a conversation. You're not just going to be quiet because you know what is important to Japan or what is big in there. Their immigration policy, they need to look at it. You can contribute to the conversation. And let me tell you guys this secret. This is so, I always make it sound very simplistic, but hey, the world is supposed to be simple. The air we breathe and the water we drink. But here's the thing. The most smartest people in the room are the people that read newspapers the most. I kid you not. I mean, when it comes to general understanding, not like mathematical, smarts, because that one is very important. Once you read newspapers back to back, you're going to get culture, history, sociology, technology, science, all in one paper. There was a quote I saw the other time. It said an average newspaper, especially maybe the LA Times, the New York Times, has more information than some entire centuries. Do you understand? In other words, all the information in a century, an average newspaper, because you can't sit down and read 100 books in a year. It's too much. But you need to know 100 things from 100 different books. So when you interact with the newspaper, you have different authors who've done that work for you from their own perspective. And there's something that they don't say that I love. She said the analysis of the. So for me, is the presenter's analysis. I mean, you hear a guy 35 years is covered Iran for the last 35 years. I mean, for goodness sake, this guy has covered Iran for 35 years. I want to hear his opinion on when this war will end. I know what he will say. He will say he doesn't know, but he will give you 2 points. He will say, look out for ABC. That's all you need to take. You put in your pocket. One day you're in the room, you see you as an icebreaker, waiting for a meeting to start. You say, what do you think about the one you're on? And then you just pull out from your pocket those 2 nice points. And the guy will be like, this girl is smart too. I think we should consider her for the role of chief communication officer. But it's interesting. Is Emmanuel Tafa that told you, pay attention to the news? That's all. I'm kidding. It works magic. So you're on your way to work, find your source. If it's podcast you're doing or you're doing the browser when you get to the office, you cannot miss the headlines. You must know what's going on, and you must know the commentaries. Those experts carry information, and they will help you. Lastly, somebody asked me for the key things. These are the 7 things I said for now. I didn't add Ebola because that one is still like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I mean, it's been around for some time, but it's more critical in the last few
Yeah,
days.
it's critical.
You know?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
add it to this list, and some things may drop off before the end of the year, and some things may be added. Full stop.
definitely. It's been when Adedoyin and I met for the first time to discuss the topic was sometime in February, Emmanuel, and we said by the time this masterclass webinar happens, the world would have changed once again. It's exponential. And as you say, read as much as possible, stay in touch with realities, and know what the implications are for your business. If you don't know, this is where understanding the right people in your organization comes in very handy. The cross-collaboration efforts that Adedoyin referred to earlier. Understand the subject matter experts in your organization, the risk, legal, the economists, etc., etc. And from there, insight is built. But insight has to start on the inside of the organization. It's tricky. It's by no means easy. And I think for communication professionals, our jobs and roles are important. It's serious and it's stressful, but it's worth it. From my side, Adedoyin, thank you so very much. Thank you for putting us in contact with Emmanuel. Thank you for that steer, for the consultations you and I've had. Emmanuel, thank you for the time you set aside. It was a most interesting, insightful conversation. You've given us a lot to reflect on, and I'm looking forward to working through your slides. There's a lot of stuff to absorb, substance, content. And this is exactly what we wanted. We aimed for a masterclass, and because of you and Adedoyin, we achieved it. So from our side, thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rihanna.
Thank you
Thank
very
you, everyone. I just want to encourage everyone. Please follow Emmanuel. I follow him on
Yes.
LinkedIn. Please
Yes.
follow him, whatever platform, just stalk him for the information that he has. And I also like to share that, I don't believe in gatekeeping. So you've learned something today. Please tell your colleagues, I learned this, follow these experts. When the recording is out, send them the link to go and watch this webinar on YouTube. Tell them about IABC Africa, because we're here to really equip communications professionals to fulfill and function in their role as trusted advisors. And we're doing it in very, very practical ways. And we don't just want to be limited to the number of people on this call. We want to impact communication professionals across Africa. So please don't gatekeep what you have learned here today. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, everyone. Thank you, Adedoyin. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Natalie, for helping us to put these webinars together. To Christine and all our board members who've joined us, to everyone else who's new to IABC, do go have a look on our socials. Follow us on LinkedIn while you're following Emmanuel, and you hit a follow to Adedoyin. Give us all a follow, and that's how we start to build a profession that's taken seriously. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.